Fantastic. Thank you everyone for being here. Olivia Collier is going to be talking to us today about a new pot of funding that I know we are all excited about hearing about. Her talk is going to be about 30 minutes long, and we're going to be recording that portion of it. Again, we are going to ask you to mute yourself during that portion of this program. After her presentation, we are going to then stop the recording and start answering questions. And so if you're like me, you're going to forget your question. Please feel free to drop questions in the chat as we go. And then Hessa and I will field those questions. And I'm going to ask Hessa to mute people who have not muted themselves, because we want a clean recording for folks down the road. Now, I'm going to introduce Olivia Collier. Olivia has served the citizens of North Carolina by working with communities on improving their quality of life. Now, sometimes this quality of life certainly intermix with community development programs, and sometimes it intermix with economic development programs. She's had the opportunity to manage the Appalachian Regional Commission, ARC, for North Carolina since January of 2007. I think that is 15 years. And if for those of you who are not familiar with the ARC program, maybe you are not in the ARC region, it is a federal and state partnership established by Congress in 1965. That is 1 year before I was born. It was a very good era, that decade. And ARC was established to create opportunities for self-sustaining economic development, and again, improved quality of life for the people of Appalachia. And of course, the Appalachian Mountain Range stretches beyond North Carolina. As the ARC program manager, she has gotten to see the remarkable effect that this infusion of funds and technical assistance has had in the 31 Western North Carolina counties that are eligible for ARC assistance. And during her time, that 15 years in ARC, the North Carolina has received over $150 million to over 600 projects. The projects have created and retained thousands of jobs, assisted families with early childhood education, access to affordable health care, and provided workforce skills training programs for numerous communities. Now, those of you who are not in the Appalachian region are thinking, what does all this have to do with me? Well, right now, Olivia is going to be talking to us about the Southeast Crescent Regional Commission funds. She's working, which is similar to ARC. And the Southeast Regional, I can't say that very quickly, SCRC, I guess.
There you go.
The SCRC is working with 69 eligible counties in North Carolina to make investments that will support sustainable communities and strengthen the economic potential of the region. Now, Hessa is going to drop into the chat those 69 eligible counties so that you can make darn sure you are in one of those counties. Thank you all again for being here. If I could just remind you one more time to keep your mic muted, and Olivia, please take it away. Thank you for being here, Olivia.
Oh, thanks, Carol. Thanks so much for the introduction. I am going to start this off saying this is the first time I have publicly talked about SCRC, the Southeast Crescent Regional Commission program, at length. So I apologize in advance if I stumble a little bit, because this is new. I heard the federal co-chair, Dr. Jennifer Clyburn-Reed, describe this a couple weeks ago as we're building a house as we're trying to live in it, and we're at the foundation level. So just bear with me, and again, I'll be happy to answer any of your questions to the best of my ability. So SCRC is, as Carol mentioned, it's an economic development partnership, and this is a little different than working with Economic Development Administration or USDA. This is really a partnership between the federal government and the states that I have listed here. So SCRC's footprint, and I have a map I'll show you in a minute, goes from Alabama all the way up to Virginia, the crescent part of the Southeast. And it includes portions of Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia, and all of the state of Florida. I do want to make special reference to the state of Florida as we go through this presentation. They, as a state, have opted out of the program this year. So just know that. If any of you have colleagues that work in Florida and want to share this program information with them, you're welcome to do that. But they currently, for this federal fiscal year, are ineligible to receive funding. And that was a decision at their state level. So SCRC's mission is to build sustainable communities and strengthen economic growth across the Southeast region. And this is what the region looks like, the footprint. I want to emphasize that everything we do with SCRC, just as everything I have done throughout my career with ARC, is all about economic development. Now, when I start describing project examples later in the presentation, you're going to see that economic development is broader than just job creation, job retention. That is a huge part of it, but we will look at things that allow communities to have the foundations for economic development. Again, this is the footprint of the SCRC region. The counties included are designated by Congress every year. And I think Hessa put in the chat the counties in North Carolina, but here is a general map of the 69 counties that are included in SCRC's footprint in North Carolina. The counties not included on this map are a part of the Appalachian Regional Commission, and there are 31 counties in that footprint. So as I mentioned a few seconds ago, SCRC is a partnership, and this is a little unusual for folks to kind of understand when they've never been involved in a partnership. So ARC has a presidential appointee, and this is the first one we've had. SCRC was authorized in the 2008 Farm Bill after almost 2 decades worth of work that started at some universities in Alabama. And then some of you may be familiar with Olivia, who was at East Carolina for a while, and then he held several leadership positions at the state level. A lot of folks for a number of years have been looking at what ARC has done in ARC's 13 states and saying in the Southeast, we needed something like ARC. And so the 2008 Farm Bill passed. In North Carolina, Mike McIntyre was a huge champion of that bill. I actually was in DC the day the bill passed and happened to be on the plane back from Washington National with a number of our congressional delegates that afternoon. And they were quite excited that the Farm Bill passed and the Southeast Crescent was included in that Farm Bill. And that was in 2008. And since 2008 until about 24 months ago, the commission was kind of idle. Until President Joe Biden appointed Dr. Jennifer Clyburn-Reed, nothing could happen at the commission. And so the president nominated Dr. Reed and the U.S. Senate confirmed her. And so about a year and a half ago, she began working with the governors of the Southeast Crescent to establish the structure. And the way SCRC works is Dr. Reed gets a vote and the governors get a vote. They will have to vote collectively on every project that comes to the Southeast Crescent. Governor Cooper currently is obviously the North Carolina representative to the commission. He is represented when he cannot make it by Jim McCleskey. Many of you may or may not know that North Carolina has an office in Washington, D.C., and Jim McCleskey is the director of that office. And he serves as the governor's alternate to SCRC. And so when the governor can't be at a meeting, Jim serves in his place, and then I staff the program. We are also served at the local level by what Congress calls local development districts. Many of you may be familiar with Council of Governments, and those are local development districts as well as organizations that are designated by the Economic Development Administration as EDDs, or economic development districts. And there are a number of those. I will note on here, there are 4 organizations noted on this slide that have asterisks. The Southeastern Economic Development Commission serves 12 counties. Those 12 counties are also served by 3 Council of Governments. And so they all are designated as local development districts. These organizations across the 69 counties are important. They're spelled out in statute as organizations that SCRC is to work with, and we encourage applicants to work with local development districts to develop and then manage their projects. And I'm happy to answer questions about that working relationship as we go through the presentation. So many of you are probably thinking, well, who is eligible for funding for SCRC? And I will tell you the easiest way to think about this is if you are a for-profit or an individual, you are not directly eligible for SCRC funding. But if you're a local development district, an Indian tribe, a local unit of government, an institution of higher education, or a public or private nonprofit organization, you are eligible for funding. Again, for-profit entities and individuals may not directly receive grant funding from SCRC, but they may be a beneficiary or a partner on a grant. So this is the footprint of SCRC in a different view. Many of you may be familiar with the state's tier system, where counties are designated as tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. SCRC, just like the other federal commissions, does something similar. And we call these our economic status designations. These are the current designations through September 30th. I'm going to show you a North Carolina specific map in just a second, but I wanted you to see the region, and you very clearly on this map can see the crescent of distress. And you can very clearly see that distress counties are counties that have been designated as the top 25 most economically distressed counties in the country. The Southeast Crescent Regional Commission has chosen to use the same designations currently that the Appalachian Regional Commission uses, and those designations are taken from across the whole country. So those red counties, and I'll show you a North Carolina map in just a second, when you look at those counties, and we have 26 of those in North Carolina, those are the top 25 most economically depressed counties in the country. I just want folks to understand that. And for the most part in North Carolina, those also mirror tier 1 counties. The next counties on the map are transitional counties. Those are the white color counties. And those counties we say they're teetering between strong and weak economies. The next category are the blue counties. Those are attainment counties. We have 10 of those in North Carolina currently, and those are the strongest counties economically in the country. They're the top 25%. Here's what the map looks like in North Carolina, and Hessa or Carol will share this map with you after, or this presentation with you after the presentation, so you can see these in closer designations. The designations come into play particularly with determining where we can fund projects and at what level. Also, and we also designate distress census tracts or isolated areas of distress, and there are 38 of those in North Carolina. And I thought this map is going to be hard to zoom in on in PowerPoint, but again, I'll share the presentation so you can see. We have 38 isolated areas of distress, and those appear in attainment counties. It's really hard to see this on this map, and I apologize, but those isolated areas of distress are in Iredell, Mecklenburg, Union, Orange, Chatham, and Wake County. Mecklenburg has the most of those isolated areas of distress. And that becomes important when trying to figure out where we're going to fund things, which is what I'm going to get to next. And so I think you all are probably pretty interested in our first grant program that we're launching with Southeast Crescent, and it's the SEID grant program, the State's Infrastructure and Economic Development Grant Program. And what's really important for you all to know, as I mentioned at the very outset, this is a partnership. So for projects to get funded by SCRC, they have to meet one of the objectives of the SCRC 5-year strategic plan. And they also have to meet an objective of the state's plan. And the governor has 2 documents that are his policy documents for this program. One is the North Carolina Economic and Development Plan, and the other is the annual state strategy statement. I have linked both of these documents at the end of the presentation, and can share the exact links on the North Carolina Department of Commerce's website. I encourage you, if you're planning on applying for these dollars, you need to look at all 3 documents. Your project cannot just align with a federal priority. It has to also align with a governor's priority underneath those federal priorities. That's really important. There are sometimes things with these programs that the federal government may want to do that state administrations don't want to do. And so you have to refer it to both documents. And it's my job to help you figure out, okay, here's what you want to do. Let's move it under this goal so that it can be fundable. Another important distinction of this program is that 40% of the total allocation must be used for infrastructure projects, and 50% of our total allocation must be invested in distressed counties and isolated areas of distress. And that becomes really important in helping me determine where I can fund. In attainment counties, those are those blue counties. The only time I can fund a project in an attainment county is there are two ways. One, the project is located in one of those isolated areas of distress. Again, those yellow census tracts that we have 38 of. Or projects within an attainment county can be funded if it's a part of a larger project with distress counties or isolated areas of distress. And so if it's a regional project and there's a direct tie back to that attainment county, I potentially could use SCRC money to support a project. All right, here's some important dates for you want to know. A pre-application is due July 21st. This is a requirement. You cannot submit a full application if you do not submit a pre-application. And those pre-applications will be screened by myself and determine if the project can move forward or not. There have already been a few pre-apps sent in. I've declined one because it wasn't eligible, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And the other two, I'm working with those applicants to answer some questions. You can go to this website and see the portal. You cannot see the pre-application questions unless you create a username and ID to get into the portal. It's very simple. It essentially is who you are, what do you want funding for, how much do you want, where's your match going to come from, and I'll talk about match in a second, and what do you hope to accomplish. That is all that the pre-app is asking. You will be notified prior to August 7th if your pre-application was accepted, and then you can submit a full application. Again, I will note these dates are subject to change, and we may end up extending some deadlines depending on what applications we receive. I mentioned a couple slides ago about the SCRC strategic plan. These are SCRC's 5 strategic goals, and then the governor has priorities under each of these goals. I will let you know, when you look at a project, your project may fall under multiple goals. Pick one, pick the best. We have to use the goal that you pick to go back to Congress and the Office of Budget and Management. We tie that to performance measures to say, here's what we're achieving under each goal. The SCRC strategic plan has identified performance measures under each goal. And if you read that document, you'll see what those are. But SCRC's goals are to invest in critical infrastructure. That's water, sewer, roads, broadband, and gas. To improve health and public service access and outcomes. Strengthen workforce capacity, foster entrepreneurship and business development, expand affordable housing stock and access. I'm going to pause here and note, we are not allowed to build housing with this program. And I'll give some examples in a couple slides of what we will do around housing. But I need to be very clear, we are not allowed to build housing. This is not a program to request money to build housing. And I'll explain that further in a minute. The last goal is to promote the environmental conservation, preservation, and access. The minimum amount of money that grantees can apply for is $50,000. Again, you will have to provide match, and I'll talk about that in a minute. For construction projects, the maximum allowed is $500,000, and for non-construction, the maximum is $350,000. I mentioned a second ago that I declined a project the other day. The applicant requested $4,000, and clearly that doesn't meet the minimum award allowed, so I declined the project. So make sure you read the NOFA, the Notice of Funding Availability, and I have linked that later in the document. That can be found on scrc.gov. And that is the guiding document that outlines the funding program in great detail. So I mentioned match. Match is required for all of SCRC's investments. The easiest way to think about match is if you're thinking about doing a project in one or more distressed county, so those red counties on the map, you have to provide 50% match. So essentially that's a dollar for dollar. So if you're asking SCRC for $500,000 to extend a water line, well, you have to have another $500,000 in another funding source to meet the match requirements. I mean, these are transitional counties. These are the white counties. For distressed counties, this is the red counties. The federal match requirement is 20%. So ARC or Southeast Crescent could fund 80% of that project up to the floor or the ceiling, and you would have to provide 20% match. For multi-county and multi-state projects, we are interested in funding projects across the state line. We know that communities don't pay attention to borders for project work. The federal cost share, the match rate can be between 60 and 90%. There's a simple math formula that we run. My best advice is if you're thinking about doing a multi-county or multi-state project is to call myself and I'll run the formula for you and tell you exactly what your match rate needs to be. So what is match? Match can be all kinds of things, and you all may be familiar with other programs, whether they're through the Department of Commerce or other federal agencies that are very specific on the types of match they require. Some programs require 20%. It has to be local match from the local government. SCRC doesn't have that requirement. Funds just must be funds that are not SCRCs. Funds can be from the applicant, from a private foundation, from another unit of local government. So that can be a state entity. We accept match from other federal agencies as long as that federal agency is an agreement that their funding can be used as match. We accept money from the private sector, individuals. We allow bank loans to be used as match. That the second bullet under types of match, some of you may have noticed we allow in-kind match, which is very different. In-kind match can be property, equipment, individuals' time. All we will require on the front end, particularly if it's someone's time or property, if you're going to use property value, you have to get a certified appraisal for the value of that property. If you're going to use employees' time or a contractor's time as match, we have to have a fiscal agent or an accounting executive that has said, X individual is going to work this many hours to this project and their hourly rate is this, and it can't be something absurd. And then you're required to track that hourly rate after the grant is awarded in case of an audit by the Inspector General. And I'm happy to answer questions about this later. So I mentioned, and I'll mention it again here, that you have to meet one of SCRC 6 goals, but then you have to also figure out where the governor's goals and the priorities are under SCRCs. These are the governor's general goals, and I'm going to give you project examples in a minute that he's looking to fund. This is not an all-inclusive list. This is just examples. The governor is very interested in funding projects related to long-term infrastructure improvements and enhancements that create and retain jobs. Extremely interested in enriching partnerships between local industries, schools, including community colleges that will allow us to continue to develop a strong pipeline of skilled workers. Extremely interested in supporting K through 12 education opportunities, especially those around STEM and STEAM education opportunities. Around healthcare. And again, I mentioned earlier, this is about economic development, but we see having a strong healthy community will lead to healthy workers. And so we can support healthcare through this program. We cannot necessarily fund through the SEID grant program a physician's salary or medical personnel salary, but what we can help communities do is fund equipment for rural healthcare clinics and do some other unique things with wraparound services. We also encourage communities and organizations to work with local development districts and other organizations on strong project design. That is going to be a question you're going to be asked in the full application. Where did this project come from? It can't just be you woke up yesterday morning and decided, well, our community needs a clinic with telehealth access. I'm going to come back in a full application and say, how do you know you need that? Has a strategic plan been done? Have you done a feasibility plan? Those are going to be really key documents that are critical to getting funding with SCRC. The last bullet on this slide is about digital infrastructure. Many of you know that we learned over the last 3 years how important it is to have access to the internet. We work hand in hand with the state's Department of Information Technology on ensuring that infrastructure is being deployed where it can. SCRC money may not necessarily be able in North Carolina because of some preclusions in law, but we can work with communities on digital literacy, doing training around helping parents and kids use computers. So we're really going to focus on digital literacy and educational opportunities around broadband deployment. The next 3 slides are where I'm going to give some just real high level examples of under each goal what the governor would like to see. Again, not an inclusive list. These are just examples. So under goal 1, where we're focused on critical infrastructure, really would love to see projects around free downtown Wi-Fi access, industrial access roads, obviously water and sewer projects that result in job creation or retention, industrial site development, and supporting communities around planning for infrastructure deployment. Under goal 2, which is our healthcare goal, we would love to see projects related to expanding telehealth programs, peer support specialist programs. And for those of you that aren't familiar with peer support specialists are individuals who have lived experience with substance use disorder, and they help individuals navigate that challenge. We have a huge focus on helping individuals who have been incarcerated and or have dealt with substance use disorder gets trained for employment and then have the supports they need to maintain employment. So peer support programs are really key to that. We're also looking forward to partnering with educational institutions across the region and doing allied health training programs, and again, supporting rural health clinics. Under our workforce goal, again, we're looking forward to focusing on K through 12 education programs and programs at the university and community college level that help expand and emphasize career pathway options for residents in the region. Interested in focusing on career access programs or college and career access programs, as well, again, as supporting wraparound programs and support services. And that can include everything from helping communities and organizations think through transportation, housing, and childcare and elder care needs. Under goal 4, around entrepreneurship and business development, some examples of projects we hope to see at some point are shared use kitchens or co-packaging facilities or small business incubators. We all have already started having conversations about community loan programs. We're looking again to support small business plan competitions and small business mentorship programs with organizations in the region. This is the last slide on project types. Again, I mentioned under housing, we cannot build housing with this program, but what we are looking to do is support funding and programs around services on title and airship, land tenure, and eviction issues. We also hope to work with the organization on home buyer education. And then we'll note that the goal of this has to be serving multiple individuals and multiple populations. It can't be a program that's just going to serve 5 individuals. It has to be pretty broad. We're hoping to fund a number of regional projects under this program. The final goal is to promote environmental conservation, preservation, and access. Under this goal, we hope to do a lot of focused work around streetscape projects, agritourism, gateway community programs, and outdoor recreation. We have found a lot of success in Western North Carolina under this type of work, and we hope to mirror some of that in Eastern North Carolina. I know this is the slide that everybody probably wants because this is the Notice of Funding Availability, the SCRC. But one question I assume has probably come up that I've not put in a slide, and that was on purpose, is how much money is available. So for this federal fiscal year, for the NOFA that is out now, North Carolina has about $4.5 million to award to projects across the 69 county footprint. So just keep that in mind as you think about projects.